There are many ways in which we can deal with different types of barriers. We can respond to them in a different way as an educator and help the learner to excel in school. We can use signing, we can use assertive devices, gestures. Our body language needs to change. We need to try and use visual and auditory um, cues for our learners to be able to get them to be part of the lesson and to be able to educate and to teach them. When we use for certain barriers visuals, for example, the learner tends to learn and understand a lot better. Certain barriers might need enlarged text. We in our worksheets we'll have to make the words bigger. Sometimes we'll have to use a lot of pictures in our worksheets. We can use different types of materials, like we can use certain objects to explain things. We can bring in pictures. The way we communicate with our learners is also important. We need to use different forms of communication for them to be able to understand. So basically, we need to see what the barrier is that the learner is suffering from and see what is the way in which we can deal with this learner by allowing them an equal chance in the classroom, an equal chance to learn, an equal chance with assessments. So, for example, if a learner cannot maybe do a written assessment because the barrier which they have does not allow them to maybe they're very slow in writing, they get very tense maybe with the barrier that they have in doing a written assessment. Whereas they might do a lot better if they have to do it orally, right? They might get a better grade, or there might be an assessment way where the learner has to create their own visual or a drawing or a timeline where they have to collect certain maybe pictures, and this is how they make their timeline and not the normal way which we would just have a written timeline. They collect the pictures, they create this timeline on a piece of cardboard or in the classroom on a line which is hanging there, and this is how we can assess them and give them a grade. So we need to give each learner an equal opportunity. Our learning outcomes are listening, speaking, reading and viewing, writing, thinking and reasoning, and naming structure and use. We need to make sure, in order for all of these to be able to be accommodated for each of our learners' barriers, we need to get background information about the language development of every learner. So basically, to get this, we need to sit down with the parents of these learners and find out information from them. What's the home language of the learners? At what age did they maybe start speaking? At what age did they learn a specific language which they're now speaking at home? With who do they converse in this language? What language do they watch their television programs is? If they're watching TV, in what language are they watching their program? This helps us to be able to get an idea of what is the best way we can work with the learners, right? So it helps if, for example, there's a learner's having a language barrier. Their home language is maybe they are foreigner, right? So they maybe speak Urdu, and the parents at home they converse with them also in Urdu. So nobody at home can really speak English. So we need to encourage the parents at home to start speaking maybe a bit more English at home, because the lessons are going to be in that, and maybe allowing the learner to speak to them in English, or encouraging them to want to also start learning English or using English a lot more at home. So sometimes we need to look at if we doing a certain task. For example, if we are completing a task in English, and if we just take an example as subject, obviously the learner is going to be marked on for sentence construction. So we need to sit down and look at how best can we help this learner to be able to get their sentence construction correctly, or how can we assess the learner in their sentence construction. Maybe by them writing it down, they have a better understanding, and maybe sometimes doing it orally, they'll be able to understand you if you sit with them, you pose the question to them, and write the answer, and then they write the answer down. So you basically explaining what is needed of them, or maybe you tell them to rather give you the answer orally. So you're giving them an explanation, and then they're giving you an answer. Barriers faced by learners are history inquiry, historical knowledge and understanding, exploring issues and historical interpretation. Our framework for teaching methodologies need to have the following principles. If we look at it, our learner is very important in the classroom. We need to make sure that we follow the following principles as when we are working with every learner, whether they be, we need to include every learner, right? So we need to make sure that our learners are the focal point of our teaching, our learning, as well as our assessment. We need to make sure that we value each learner. Each learner needs to be equal, no matter what disability they have, what race they are, what culture they have, what background they come from. Every learner should be equal. We need to encourage all our learners to participate, and we need to make them a part of every lesson. So make sure that we include our learners, those who are shy, those who have disabilities, those who feel scared. We need to include them in our lesson and find the best way that we can make them feel valuable. We need to find the best way where we can get them to participate. So we need to make our lessons where we encourage them to participate. So try and do group work, try and group them with their peers, be a part of it where you are there to guide them. You need to try and have resources that resources at the time of teaching, learning, and assessment, which will be there for all the differences which the learners have. You need to make sure that when you do your assessments, each assessment must be adapted to the needs of the learners. So every learner needs to be adapted. That's why you will notice when a paper is set, a paper is set on the different levels of the learners. So if, for example, a learner is maybe weak in a certain part where, for example, some learners may do better in multiple choice, where sometimes a very bright learner, they might only be able to do well in a long question. So we need to have a balance in our paper where learners each get the opportunity to excel. So it covers up for the marks where they might. So we start off with simple questions like multiple choice, match column A with column B. Maybe you can ask them to draw something. So it helps every learner, and each learner can be able to pass and do well in the assessments. We need to appreciate all of our learners and show them that we appreciate them, no matter what background they come from, no matter what language they speak, what culture, what religion they have. Each learner needs to be given the opportunity to be able to record their work in different ways. So if a learner is maybe good at recording their work in a specific way, we need to allow them that opportunity to record down their work. We need to make sure that we have clear expectations of our learners. We need to see what are the interests of our learners and work towards that. We need to make sure that we take into consideration all of the different levels at which our learners are, and then work. So every year will be different. Sometimes in one class, you may have a class where there are a lot of bright learners, and your level does not have to be maybe where you have to spend a lot of time on certain sections because the learners can't grasp it. Whereas maybe one year you have learners who are average or they're weak and they need a lot of time spent. For example, maybe if you are teaching a certain topic and they might need, so you need to think of a way in which you can interest your learners into that lesson and to be able to understand it. So basically you are looking at how the learners learn best, and you are taking consider the pace in which they can learn. So if you were to follow these principles and these in your teaching methodology, you will see a big change in your learners, because you now are considering them. You are not setting a paper, or you are not having your lessons to your level. You're not thinking of how you would understand. You need to place yourself in their shoes and see what gets them to um, uh, to master that lesson, what encourages them. Don't make them where they fear to learn, where they feel that they never go. Always make changes, use new types of technology, use new ways to be able to learn. Multi-level teaching is to accept every learner, even though they may have barriers, and to involve every learner in classroom activities. We need to prepare different lessons for different levels. So basically, we need to make sure that the lesson that we are preparing will be done in such a way that every learner's needs is fulfilled and every learner understands. So we need to be able to use different methods of learning, teaching, and assessment. We can't be where we feel that we have set the assessment already and that is what we are going to be using. So we need to always include different teaching techniques which will assist and reach every learner in the class. So by doing this here, we need to make sure that we consider every learner's learning style. We need to involve them in the lesson. We need to acknowledge that that some learners need adjusted expectations. We need to allow our learners to be able to choose a method which suits them to be able to understand the lesson, to be able to do the activities which are needed. We need to make sure that every learner's differences are seen to. We need to accept the different methods and accept what the learner is giving us. So if, for example, we have taught them one method and a learner prefers to do something in another method, we need to accept that method if it's correct and say that you've done well and you understand and what you've explained or what you've done in the assessment, even though it's not to how maybe you as a teacher have it in your memo, you need to accept that it's correct. So every learner needs to be accepted. There are 3 steps in which we can develop a lesson to accommodate diversity. The first step is to identify assessment standards with the underlying skills, knowledge, and values. The second step is to determine the teacher's methods of presentation. And the third step is to determine the assessment standards which will determine the learner's method of practice. Right? The first step is we need to work towards what we actually want to achieve. So we need to communicate to our learners what is expected of them and what are they expected to achieve by the end of the year, by the end. So we need to go step by step and say, for this term, we would like you to, for this term, I would like you to achieve maybe a certain grade, or we can say that we are going to be working towards a certain grade. So for example, if we have a learner maybe who's getting 50%, we can encourage that learner to now say this term, I would like you to increase that by 5%. So we work and we grasp things by going step by step, and things are not just going to be happening overnight, right? So we need to make sure that we make it clear to the learners what is required and what is needed of them. The second step is to determine the teacher's method of presentation. We need to make sure that we don't only present to our learners one way or all of our lessons. We need to try and explain to them in different ways and use different methods and different approaches to be able to get them to understand. So if we feel at some point when we're doing a lesson that the learners are not understanding the way that we're doing it, we need to change that method or come back tomorrow and say, how can we make them understand in a different way, take some time out to think about it and find a new way to explain to them. There's different methods. We can use visuals, we can use we can make videos, we can even sometimes for certain activities take them on a field trip. Take them on a field trip to actually show them, especially in a subject, for example, like social science, like history. We can take them to museums, we can take them to where they can actually see and then come back, and we can then make notes, or we can then talk about it, because now we've actually the learners, because some learners are maybe visual learners. They will understand and learn by seeing something or experiencing it. And a lot of times, if you look at it, today's learners will learn by actually doing something, like going on a field trip, going to a museum. They will actually enjoy it a lot more, and they will learn a lot more because they actually are being in that environment and seeing. Learners don't like in today's time to just be taught from a textbook or to be explained something. They want change. they tend to get bored a lot and very often, right? And then if we look at step 3, we see that step 3 is to determine the assessment standard, which will determine the learner's method of practice. So we need to encourage our learners to demonstrate their attainment in terms of their own abilities. So we need to use different strategies to assess our learners and to see our learners' performance. We need to value them equally. We need to see how best we can assess them. Is it going to be, we need to at all times not only stick to letting them write an exam. We can do an oral, we can do a written, we can make them do an activity, we can make them have a discussion, we can make them make something, we can make them do timelines, charts, and that's how we can assess them and put all of this together and then grade them. Cooperative learning is when learners are put in groups and we actually need to mix them up. So basically, when we make our groups, we need to have our groups in such a way where we have different types of learners mixed together. So we group them with their peers. We group them in groups where we know that there will be learners who are there to assist and to help the ones who can't cope or can't manage. So basically, your learners work together to be able to reach a common goal, to solve a problem, to make a decision, or to produce a product. And they basically, you are checking on each other whether they have learned the same content and to get each one on par, right? So basically, you need to make sure that flexibility is encouraged inside the group, and make sure that it's not where only one person is only doing all of the work, or it's on one person's shoulders, but that person is there as a guide and to assist and to help the learners who are finding difficult.